Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. We are going to have a look at the suggestions passed to the developers for December of 2024, and what we're going to do is first of all have a look at aviation. I'm going to split this into two parts because there is actually some really cool vehicles in this one that I want to give more of an aggressive focus to. So in this one we will cover the American, German, the Soviet, also British and Japanese suggestions. And then in the other part, we'll have a look at the other nations. Let's get started, and as always, if you enjoy this type of content, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get into it. The first vehicle is the F-16XL, and this definitely is a XL F-16. With the YF-16 winning the lightweight fighter program, General Dynamics quickly looked onwards and began working on derivatives of the F-16 to further improve the airframe. Led by Harry J. Hilliker, the Deputy Chief Engineer of the YF-16, the project partook in the Supersonic Cruise and Maneuvering Program, or SCAMP, with the goal of producing an aircraft capable of supercruising, or the ability to maintain supersonic flight without the assistance of afterburners. To achieve this, the team experimented with various wing configurations in collaboration with NASA Langley Research Center, before settling on a cranked arrow delta wing, which proved to offer more than twice the wing area with minimal difference in drag. Impressed by the development, the USAF provided two F-16 airframes to Hilliker to be heavily modified into the full-size prototype of the SCAMP project. Now dubbed the F-16XL, the craft gained an additional 56 inches from the extra sections added to the front and back, and the second prototype became a two-seater after a mishap during construction. But the large, new carbon fiber skinned wing undoubtedly drew attention. Not only could it hold 82% more fuel, but it also boasted 17 hardpoints, or according to some sources, 27. Which was twice the amount of the F-16A at the time. Furthermore, it can achieve up to 83 knots over its production counterpart at sea level at military power setting and 311 knots on afterburner at altitude while carrying a bomb load. The reception of the plane was high, as F. Clinton Berry Jr., the editor-in-chief of Air Force magazine at the time, would say in 1983, "To say that Hilliker's design team achieved its objectives is an understatement." So it was no surprise that the Air Force would submit the design to the Enhanced Tactical Fighter Competition, which was later the Dual Role Fighter Program, to determine the replacement of the F-111 Aardvark. There it would face competition, though, from another modified form of an existing aircraft, the F-15 Strike Eagle. Unfortunately for the F-16XL, the F-15E had several leg-ups on its delta wing rival, sharing many parts with the production F-15D, allowing for a cheaper production cost compared to the largely new construction of the XL, and also the existence of a second engine, meaning life or death in the missions deep in enemy airspace, the primary goal of the ETF competition. These factors, plus higher top speed and also service ceiling, ultimately meant the defeat for the F-16 variant. All was not lost, though, for the two prototypes, as the two would live the rest of their active life as NASA's research crafts to perform various aeronautical experiments before retiring to the Air Force Flight Center Museum. So these vehicles are definitely interesting, and it would be really cool to see them in the game. They are also different because they have different engines. Basically, for the first prototype, you had the Pratt & Whitney F100 PW200 turbofan, and for the second, you had the General Electric F110GE 129 turbofan, with one 20mm M61 Vulcan rotary and 17 hardpoints. It could carry pretty much anything you'd want, including the AMRAAM, AIM-9s, and of course general purpose bombs that were tested on it. But I'm sure if this thing had actually gone to full service, it would have been able to carry much more. For the Germans, we have the Focke-Wulf 189C, specifically the V6 strike aircraft. Already shown in the Legion Condor in the Spanish Civil War, it was shown that the close-up reconnaissance planes of the Luftwaffe, the HE-46 and the HS-126 at the time, were far too slow and also unprotected. As such, the RLM created requirements for a new plane, which had to have an MG defensive armament, as well as 200 kilos of bombs with at least 900 PS engine performance to have the required speed and also mobility. There were 3 companies that got involved in the contract. This was Focke-Wulf, Arado, and also, of course, Blom & Voss. These prototypes were built from each of the companies, the Focke-Wulf 189, the Arado 198, and also the BV141. The prototypes were powered by 2 Argus AS410 engines with 430 PS each, which were less than ideal. However, they were the only engines that weren't in production for the war effort, so therefore they weren't needed by higher priority planes. In April of 1937, the BV141 was quite well developed. However, it was a bit too unique and not really ready, as well as using the BMW A1A engines, which were once again needed for other planes. So therefore, the Focke-Wulf 189 went into production with multiple generations of this. The C-Series were trials of 2 prototypes to convert the reconnaissance to a close support ground strike fighter, removing the big 3 crew compartment and replacing it with a tiny armoured capsule for 2 crew, which was heavily armoured and also had 1 MG-81Z as a defensive armament. Furthermore, the offensive armament was increased to 4 MG-17s and 2 20mm MG-FFs. Equipped with 2 Argus AS410A engines with 469 PS each, it was, unfortunately, horrible to fly, with bad visibility and also a crew of 2 really crammed into a compartment that was pretty much designed for 1. After the 2 prototypes, which the second, the V6, was already an improved version, the project was abandoned in favour of the HS129. So, even though this thing never got anywhere, it would be quite fun to have as a vehicle, since it would be quite a nice ground attacker with a lot of armament on top of it. Many different guns which could turn up, and then of course access to 200 kilos worth of bomb load too. The Russian suggestion is for the Su-37 Terminator. This is a derivative of the Su-27 programs, specifically stuff like the Su-27M under the T-10M modernization program. Now, this article actually goes through a very in-depth setup for the Su-27s, which were modernized, and basically even their serial numbers, the differences between them, and also all of the different stuff about them. So if you want to have a look and see how convoluted and crazy the modernizations of the Su-27s are, and why it's very hard to track them, and why eventually we'll probably have about 20 of them in War Thunder, you can find it in this article. The Su-37 Terminator specifically, though, was the second last of the 12 Su-27M or Su-35 Flanker E prototypes that were built. However, this is the only one that had engines with 2D thrust vectoring and almost the thrust of the AL-41F1S, which was 140 kilonewtons, which later followed with the T-10BM modernization program. Otherwise, the Su-37 was pretty similar to the other variants that were modernized. It had the Bars R PESA radar, canards, the L-150 Pastel RWR, and also more. This vehicle had access to a 30mm cannon, which is the same one that you see on all of these Soviet vehicles. It had 12 pylons, which it could carry 8 R-27ERs, 2 R-27ETs, or 6 R-73s, or 10 R-77s. It could also carry a bunch of bombs and guided bombs, air-to-ground missiles, and also unguided rockets too, since of course it's a derivative of the Su-27. Unfortunately, when it came to this program, after it was tested and even shown at Farnborough, which is really interesting, it ended up crashing, which basically meant it was over for it. Now, there is a bunch of other surviving prototypes of the Su-27, and this one, unfortunately, after crashing, didn't make the cut, which is very sad to see. But it has a really interesting engine. It also has access to a really interesting flight model, technically, so hopefully we can see it at some point. For Britain, we get a familiar face. This is the Washington B, which is the British Superfortress. The B-29 Superfortress stands as one of the most iconic aircraft of the Second World War, renowned for its role in the Pacific Theater, most notably in the bombing campaigns against Imperial Japan, and also, developed by Boeing, the B-29 was designed to meet specifications for a high-altitude strategic bomber capable of carrying massive bomb loads over long distances. Its development began in the early 1940s, with the first flight occurring in 1942. However, it wasn't until 1944 that the B-29 entered active service. The B-29 was also the single most expensive development of the war. It was equipped with state-of-the-art features for its time, such as a pressurized cabin and remote-controlled defensive gun turrets. Its operational range allowed it to conduct missions from bases in the Pacific, easily reaching targets in Japan that were previously out of range. The B-29's most famous missions include the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and also Nagasaki in August of 1945, which ultimately led to Japan's surrender and the end of the Second World War. Following the Second World War, in 1950, the B-29 was acquired by the UK through the NATO Mutual Aid Defence Pact and became known in RAF service as the Washington B Mk. The US was mothballing large quantities of aircraft at this time. And Britain needed a bomber with a longer operational range than the Lincoln, so the arrangement was indeed mutually beneficial. 87 operational Washington B Mks served as a vital component of Britain's bomber fleet during the early Cold War era, deployed for reconnaissance missions, maritime patrols, and also strategic bombing exercises. The Washington B Mk contributed significantly to the RAF's deterrent strategy in the nascent stages of the Cold War, before being replaced in 1954 by a more advanced jet-powered set of bombers. For Japan, we have another Phantom. This is the Mitsubishi F-4EJ Kai ADTW, the Super Kai Phantom. Now, ADTW stands for Air Development and Test Wing. The F-4EJ Kai is obviously the upgrade of the standard F-4EJ, which we already have in the game, and this variant, the ADTW variant, has access to better munitions since it was part of the Test Wing. That's basically the difference between this one and previous ones. Now, I'm going to say a bunch of stuff here, which is going to sound confusing, but it'll make sense as it goes along. But that's the basic premise of what this vehicle is. Since the vehicle is an ADTW, experimental armament can be found on it, otherwise the armament of the normal F-4EJ Kai would be identical. As an experimental armament, of which there is no serial examples on the F-4EJ Kai, there are the XGCS-2 and also XAAM-4. The XAAM-4 is the prototype version of the first AAM-4, which according to isolated reports was also tested by two F-4EJ Kais of the ADTW squadron at least twice since 1997 and 2004. Since the AAM-4 is based on the AIM-7's body, it doesn't require any special modifications to the suspension of the airframe. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be any pictures or official information have emerged to this day about this project, which is not surprising because of the secrecy of the XAAM-4 project at the time, and also still remains highly effective OPSEC, but there are also barely any pictures of the 37-8308 even until the F-4EJ Kai was decommissioned in 2021. Hopefully more information emerges about this. So basically what you have here is a vehicle which should be able to take AAM-4s, according to hopefully stuff like this. So it would have all of the same armaments that you've seen before. So the AIM-9P3, AIM-9L, AIM-3, the AIM-7E, 7F, and 7M. All of the dumb bombs and rockets. It could also carry the ASM-1s and 2s, and also the XAM-4s and the XGCS-2s, along with 3 GAU-4s and the ANLQ-131. So this would be a Phantom with a bunch of additional armaments that were used for testing purposes. So, that is the vehicles passed to the devs for December 2024. As always, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.